This week we have prediction markets coming to Hedera. We dive into the anatomy of a crypto liquidation event. There's some Hedera token listings I want to dive into, an all-new shark bites, and much more. Welcome back. I'm Brandon, the HBAR Bull, here once again to bring you the latest in the Hedera ecosystem. But as always, none of this is financial advice. Use it for entertainment or educational purposes only. So the first thing I want to get into is we have two examples of drops in the crypto market, but they're for completely different reasons. And I wanted to just explain what exactly is going on. First, on Monday, we had a picture-perfect forced liquidation at 6 a.m. Eastern Time. So let's take a look at exactly what happened. With these events, for it to be worth it for big whales out there, there has to be a decent amount of liquidity. So they usually target Bitcoin or Ethereum, but the entire crypto market is impacted. To get into the structure that makes it possible, investors take out leveraged long positions on exchanges for a given token. If the market moves against them, the collateral, usually posted in the form of crypto, is forced to be sold, resulting in downward pressure on the market, forcing more liquidations and more drops until those targeted leveraged longs are wiped out, and possibly many more. Large market participants can see where there's clusters of these liquidation points as exchanges publish liquidation levels in aggregated order books. Armed with that information, with relatively little capital, whales can push the market down, causing a waterfall or cascade of liquidations. These are 1-minute candles at the time in question, and on Binance alone, about 5,600 ETH were liquidated, pushing the price down over 5%. So the question is, why would whales do something like this? Well, it could be to push prices lower to get better entry points, but even more likely, the whale could short the market, betting the market's going to go down, cause the massive drop themselves, sit back, and collect a massive payday. There's also ways to benefit from arbitrage opportunities, which bots across CeFi and DeFi feast on. And this is one of the major factors that causes the entire crypto complex to sharply fall almost in unison. So you might be telling yourself, this really doesn't seem fair, and if it was taking place in traditional markets, would this be legal? And the answer is hell no. It would be clear market manipulation and prosecuted. So why is it allowed to happen in crypto? Well, it's simple. Regulators just haven't really engaged yet. And while I see reasonable innovation being given a wide berth by current regulators, I do think they're going to start to crack down on this kind of stuff. Now, on Thursday, we saw another drop, but I'd say it's an example of normal market action. These are 5-minute ETH candles on Binance and are all a small fraction of what we saw on Monday. Not to mention, during this time, most risk assets like stocks were down, whereas on Monday, other risk assets were actually up. The risk-off environment is impacting the crypto market and is driven by a couple factors, the main one being the threat of a government shutdown as we approach the U.S. debt ceiling. With nearly half of the U.S. economy being driven by government spending in one form or another, disruptions in that spending can have a massive impact on the economy. There was also some positive economic data that could give the Fed pause in cutting rates, and we're in that strange spot where good news can be bad news for the markets. Now, my base case is the debt ceiling will be lifted after a short government shutdown like every other time, but anything could happen. So the first example there of a crypto drop, the forced liquidation, those are just features at this point of the crypto market. There's people out there that will try to take advantage of things, and I wouldn't necessarily think of them as bearish events unless it has a huge impact on sentiment, which I really didn't see on Monday. There was some concern certainly, but it wasn't overly impactful for the overall sentiment, even though there's plenty of people saying this is the end. Now, the drop we've seen on Thursday and Friday, that could, if continued, have an impact because it's because of macroeconomic factors. And certainly if we enter a recession or a prolonged government shutdown or something along those lines, that could have major impacts on risk assets as a whole and certainly on crypto as well. But we haven't gotten to that point yet. The other thing is we have plenty of tailwinds in the space. You've heard me talk about all the amazing developments going on in Hedera. Well, we have that across the entire space. Because of the favorable regulatory environment, we have big players that are entering this space on a lot of different fronts, and that's only going to be a major tailwind. Plus, we have seasonality. We're entering a time of the year in the 4-year cycle, if we're going to stick to the 4-year cycle, where things are potentially getting better. We have liquidity that should be entering the market over the next year or so. So there's a lot of things to be excited about. But to go into an example of how things are looking really good on the regulatory side of things, There was a joint statement put out by the SEC and the CFTC. So those are the major regulators for the crypto space. And the statement said, today's DeFi protocols enable direct peer-to-peer trading without the need for intermediaries. We affirm that both agencies are prepared to consider innovation exemptions to create safe harbors to allow market participants to engage in peer-to-peer trading of spot, leveraged, margined, or other transactions in spot crypto assets, including derivatives such as perpetual contracts over DeFi protocols. These safe harbors and exemptions would allow market participants to build commercially viable models while agencies advance longer-term rulemaking. So this kind of language should have HBARBarians and, just as importantly, some of the largest players in the Hedera space really excited, because those enterprises needed that regulatory go-ahead before moving forward with a lot of the projects that we know are going on in the background and the ones that we talk about here on a weekly basis. The regulators now are providing a constant drumbeat of encouraging language saying, go ahead, get out there and innovate. So I'm really excited about that. I also, of course, wanted to dive into these recent drops in the crypto market and explain that, there are going to be drops. Sometimes those are going to be opportunities. Sometimes they're going to be traps. But I do think that there's a lot of regulatory tailwinds out there. There's innovation tailwinds out there. There's ETF tailwinds. There's seasonality tailwinds. There's so much to be excited about. So now I'm going to take a hard left turn. We're going to get into a new market that's going to be entering the Hedera space, a prediction market with POG Predict. Today, I'm happy to have Clay. He is the CEO and founder of POG Predict. Clay, thank you so much for hopping on.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Well, it's absolutely my pleasure. Clay, to start off here, we're going to keep it really simple. Can you tell us about POG Predict?
Sure. So, as Brandon said, I am the founder and CEO of POG Predict, which the name is derived from an old meme that floated around the Twitch space. A lot of streamers, a lot of viewers used that meme, that emote called Poggers. It stands for play of the game, which is a really big deal in the gaming scene. A lot of people know this that work in the gaming scene or enjoy the gaming scene. So it's a well-known name, a well-known emote that is out there. So I thought it was very fitting for the name of a prediction market that we've built, considering the fact that what we've built here is a prediction market solely for the esports community. And the reason that we did this is because we saw a gigantic gap in the market. We saw that Polymarket and Kalshi, the two largest prediction markets, don't really focus very much on the esports scene. Every now and then they'll post like some of the largest events, but as a whole, they don't really care too much about some of these tier 2, tier 3 events. And we do. We love them. We love all esports events, and we want to see the community grow. We also think that traditional sports books don't have the transparency. Some of them have incredibly high fees. We want to cut all of that out with prediction markets. We also think that prediction markets on average are a lot better at predicting things. You'll see with Polymarket, I think they posted a statistic that said 82% of their markets end up leaning towards the side of the favorite. So that is a really high, really amazing statistic to see. And I think that we can build that for the esports scene as well.
So I was going to ask you next about why you chose prediction markets. I was going to ask about why you chose esports first, but you've already kind of explained that perfectly. Can you dig into where you might grow from here, why you chose Hedera, and any other topics you might want to dive into?
Yeah, absolutely. So Hedera is really unique in the fact that it's not necessarily a blockchain, right? And one thing that I find really unique about Hedera is that the fees are always transparent. You know exactly what the fees are going to be going forward, whereas some other blockchains out there, you have no idea if transactions spike, then fees also do. I love the fact that you're always going to get low and transparent fees on Hedera. Another thing was that Hedera, came to us and offered us a very great partnership deal. And I have to say that we are very proud to be partnered with the Hedera Foundation. We are very excited to be building here. And I think that it's going to be a great growth trajectory for all of the things that Hedera is planning. Our team has been following all of these new marketing plans and goals that the Hedera Foundation has set. And we see how they're building in the gaming space. We're really excited about that. Maybe we could integrate with some of these games. We just don't know yet, but there's a lot of exciting things that are shaping up that we want to be a part of.
That makes perfect sense. Now, you mentioned, of course, we all know that Poly Market has a huge first mover advantage. In your opinion, how can Hedera make its mark in the prediction markets?
I think that Hedera, as I said before, the very cheap transaction fees make it very easy to build on this architecture. So what we can do here is we can build abstractions similar to Poly Market and invite people to come and play on POG Predict on this architecture that allows us to bring in Web 2 users that have no idea that they're even playing on crypto. They will have no idea because what we're implementing is native USDC as our token of choice. So when they come, we want to make onboarding as easy as possible. We want to make it so easy that even your grandma can do it. That's our goal at POG Predict. And Hedera allows us to do that. So I think that what you'll find once we implement version 2 of our platform, that it will be an incredibly easy on and offboarding process. And Hedera is allowing us to do that. They're working with us very, very smoothly to get us to where we need to be for that. Because when we first started this process a few months ago, not everything was in place. But like I said before, the Hedera Foundation is working relentlessly to try and get everything in place so that builders like us can come in and do what we have to do to build these products.
Clay, for anybody who's not familiar with prediction markets with Hedera, can you walk them through how this all works, from connecting your account to funding your account to actually playing the game?
Sure. So a prediction market is basically the same thing as a betting slip, I guess you could say. There are sports books out there that allow you to go and bet on the outcome of games and things like that. Well, prediction markets allow you to do a very similar thing, but kind of in a more decentralized way, meaning that users create the odds. Instead of the sports book that goes in and sets the odds as the matches occur, the users actually determine what the odds are going to be on set matches. So what you find is that the odds might be different from what you'll find on a sports book. They could be close, but they could be far away as well, which creates some sort of hedging opportunities as well for people that bet on sports books. So what we've done here is we've created a platform. Well, version 2 will have this. So basically you go sign in, create a username, and from there you find a list of matches that are playing out. And they can be in Counter-Strike, Dota 2, League of Legends, and Valorant. And essentially, you pick the match that you want to bet on. You go to those match pages, and you see which team you want to place your bet on. And there are going to be a lot more different types of markets once we launch version 2. But initially, it's just going to be based on outcomes of matches. So you will go into the market page, you will choose the team that you want to bet on, and then you will place however much USDC on that team that you want to bet on. Let me back up just a little bit though, because you have to onboard, right? So after you create your username, then we are using a on and off ramp that allows you as the user to purchase USDC from a variety of on and off ramps. So this is an aggregator that we've teamed up with to allow users to choose the best on and off ramp for them. So they'll choose whichever one they want. They'll KYC with that specific on and off ramp. They'll purchase the USDC for a small set fee, and then they will have that integrated directly into their account, their user account on the platform. And all of that is abstracted. So they don't have to worry about setting up a wallet. They don't have to do any of that. They don't have to download anything. All of that will be built into the platform itself, but it's still self-custodied. So they don't have to worry about us losing their keys. They don't have to do any of that if they're native Web3 users. And they'll also have the opportunity, if they are a native Web3 user, they can log in with their own wallet if they choose to. So if they want to log in with Hashpack, they can absolutely do that, which is what we currently have implemented on V1. That's what you can currently log in with. So once you onboard and you've purchased the USDC, then you can go to any of these markets that I'm referring to and place your prediction on whichever team you think is going to win. And you can even hedge. You can purchase options on both sides. You can purchase on who you think the winner is going to be, but you could also hedge into who you think might not win, but still has a shot of winning. There is also going to be very similar markets to what we see on Polymarket and Kalshi, where you can bet no on certain options. So let's say there's a multi-option market where there's a list of teams set up for a tournament, right? You think that there is one specific team that is going to win the entire tournament. You can bet on them, but you can also bet no on all of the other teams. Let's say you know for a fact that there's a team, they have no shot of winning a tournament, right? You can easily go in and bet no on that team and have a pretty great experience knowing that that team has no shot of winning the tournament.
Now, this makes perfect sense, and it's nice to hear that you can fund it from, if you're involved with DeFi and you're getting USDC that way, you can fund it that way as well. So two things. What are some of the first games that you're going to be able to bet on? And the second question I have around that is we have all kinds of stuff in the Hedera ecosystem, from Earthlings to Legends of the Past to Karate Combat, Circle of Games. If these teams want to, possibly have some of their competitions, put up on POG Predict, how would they go about that?
That's a great question. So first question, we're solely focusing on Counter-Strike, League of Legends, Valorant, and Dota 2 to begin with. Those are the four biggest esports in the world. Those are the four that we think have the best shot of getting us growth on the platform. But to answer your second question, we are going to have community markets on the platform, meaning that we are going to whitelist certain people or certain groups that we think are trusted members of the community to go in and create their own markets on the platform. And on top of that, they will have the opportunity to earn on those markets. Let's say you want to come onto the platform and create a market. You would actually earn a % of the revenue from the fees of that market by doing so. So it basically creates this opportunity for creators out there or groups out there that want to earn a little bit of extra revenue to go out and display these markets to their community and say, hey, come get involved. And in the process, hopefully, it adds a little bit of liquidity because people tell their communities about it. Their communities come in, they get excited about it, more liquidity flows in. But to answer your question about who can come in and create these markets, it will be a whitelist system that we're setting up because, as you know, there are some really bad actors out there, and we want to make sure that we're protecting our platform as much as possible while also making it a little bit more decentralized, right? Because at the end of the day, that's what crypto is all about. We want to decentralize things. We want to make things more accessible to the average everyday user. But I think it would be really cool to the fighting, what's it called? The
Karate Combat.
Yeah, Karate Combat. I've watched a couple of those, and I know that they have their own app, right?
Mm-hmm.
So That would be really interesting. I don't know if they would be interested in working with us since they kind of have their own platform already, but it's definitely something to look into.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I actually could make that connection. We could see what we can put together. But I see this, as a promotional opportunity as well for some of the games that are building on Hedera. But that's pretty much all I have for the regular questions. Is there anything else that you'd like to pass on before we let you go?
I just want to say that right now we're currently in version 1 of the product. We migrated from the base blockchain recently, and the product itself is not at all where we want it to be. It is a very much a beta or MVP version of what we're trying to achieve here. And so I just want to make that very clear that if you go on the site and you don't see all of the things that I listed off in this video, it's because we're not quite there yet. We will continue building, we will continue growing the platform, and we're going to have a much better product very soon.
Well, that's always the path. You always have to be improving the entire time, but we're excited that you're getting started on Hedera. We appreciate you coming on here today and telling us about it, and good luck.
Thank you so much, Brandon, for having me.
So one of the things that I talk about with Hedera all the time is the type of people that the ecosystem attracts. We have, whether they're builders, whether they're community members, they know how to grind, they're talented people, they come up with fantastic ideas, and they don't give up. And getting back to POG Predict, why that has me so excited is when you have the confluence of, that community and a prediction market, they can come up with really innovative ways to use that infrastructure, coming up with fantastic pools for these prediction markets. So I'm excited to see when we do get to version 2, and again, that's supposed to be towards the end of this year, we're going to get some of those whitelisted community members to come in and come up with some really interesting ways to use a prediction market. So I'm excited to see what comes out of that. The next thing we're going to jump into is a few listings of Hedera tokens that are happening out there. First off, the native token for Saucerswap has been listed on the Filipino exchange called Coins, and they've also added HBAR. DOVU also got a centralized exchange listing on LCX after their community showed up for a Telegram competition, beating out 3 other tokens for that listing spot. Another important development brought to my attention by longtime HBARdarian Bonacci on X, the Hedera version of USDC can now be stored on your ledger. And with that, I don't think it's going to be long until you can store other HTS tokens on there as well. I also have to congratulate the Top Flight football team who's bringing Up Only Gaming to the Premier League in the UK on minting their token. The token ID is 0.0.9957456, and those that picked up the Top Flight NFTs should associate the token in the account they're being held. Top Flight also mentioned a liquidity pool that's opening up on Saucerswap soon. Next up, there's a new player that's looking to enter the Hedera DeFi scene with VOLS, which is an order book automated market maker for institutions launching on Hedera. Now, I'm not sure if VOLS is going to be a retail platform as well, but from some of the grumblings I'm hearing, I think it's going to be. At launch, they're looking to provide high throughput trading with near instant finality. So I'm looking forward to VOLS hitting the market. Now, I don't have all the information around this. I'm just starting to hear grumblings now, but as soon as I do have more information, I'll make sure to pass it on. The next thing I want to get into is I know a few months ago we covered how Archax was working with ABRDN and the Lloyds banking group on creating collateral to be used in TradFi. And they just came out with a clip that explains it a little bit more fully.
This collaboration between Lloyds, ABRDN and Archax marks a major step forward in digital finance. The UK is a leading hub for derivatives with a market share of close to 50%. Collateralization protects not only market participants, but the economy as a whole.
In this groundbreaking initiative, tokenized interest in units of Aberdeen Investments money market fund and tokenized UK gilts were used as collateral for FX trades between Lloyds and Aberdeen.
To enable this trade to happen, Archax issued, transferred and then securely held these permissioned digital tokens on the Hedera Hashgraph public blockchain.
This is the first time digital assets have been used as collateral in the UK. It proves that they can be used in regulated financial markets under our existing legal framework.
By using tokenized money market funds as collateral, we can lower trading desk funding costs, improve capital efficiency, and significantly reduce settlement times.
Now that we've established this key digital milestone, we're looking to start scaling the use of tokenized assets as transferable collateral.
It's been a collaborative effort between Lloyds, Aberdeen and Archax, and we're excited to be making real progress, pushing boundaries and advancing the future of digital finance.
Next up, we have Michael Cantor, the president of Hashgraph Online, talking about data provenance for AI wearables. And of course, Hedera is perfect for that, so let's check it out.
Hey everyone, it's Michael Cantor from Hashgraph Online. I wanted to talk about AI wearables because they're no longer science fiction. Meta just launched these Ray-Ban display glasses, and Apple is rolling out Apple Intelligence with on-device AI. That means AI assistants just aren't on their phones anymore. They're out in the real world with us. You go to conferences and people are wearing these Ray-Ban displays in front of you. You are being recorded constantly. It's also exciting, but it's risky. A tiny LED isn't enough to let bystanders know that they're being recorded. We don't always know what happens to the data or if it's being used to train models. And when an AI assistant makes a mistake in the physical world, like misidentifying an object or giving us the wrong directions, the consequences are a lot more serious than a bad search result on Google. So what needs to change? Companies have to design for accountability, not just convenience. That means clear signals when the devices are recording, tighter limits on how the data is used, and independent checks on whether the tech works the way it claims. Standards can help too. For example, groups like Hashgraph Online are experimenting with ways to log consent and data use in verifiable ways. Whether or not that specific approach takes off, the idea is important. Trust has to be built in, not bolted on later. AI wearables could be as transformative as a smartphone, but they'll only get there if people feel safe wearing them in public. And that requires one thing above all, trust. Every week, we run a space called Hedera X AI, where we talk about topics like this. We host pitch competitions and so much more around the AI industry and research what's happening on a day-to-day basis. Join us at 12 p.m. Eastern so you can learn more.
So Michael is the kind of person I'm talking about when I said that Hedera has a way of attracting a certain type of community member, a certain type of talent, a certain type of builder. I have so much faith in people like Michael and him in particular to build something amazing at the crossroads of Hedera and AI. All right, so without further ado, let's jump into an all-new Shark Bites. Rob, how you doing today? Welcome back.
Hey, Brandon. Yep, normal busy, spinning plates week. We've had workshops with the Reserve Bank of Australia for AP+. I've been getting heat off the ground. Just had UseCom this morning, literally came off UseCom onto this one, where we had a great conversation with Aberdeen about their Lloyds FX proof of concept and what happens next, along with all the other project stuff. So just lots going on. It's crazy.
Well, that's
absolutely crazy. And I'm in Frankfurt next week. So I'm going to Cybos, which is the big Swift banking conference in Frankfurt. I'm on a panel with Swift talking about what we're doing with Project Acacia and the wider space as well. So never a quiet moment in Hedera.
Well, we love that you gave us some time with all those spinning plates amongst all the other things that you do. But we just have a couple things today because we know you're busy. The first one is something that's been coming up a fair amount, and you're the perfect person to address it. Even though plenty of people have asked, this particular question comes from Mikhail, who says, why is Google building its own layer 1 network instead of using Hedera? How's that affecting them being on the governing council? They supposedly were developing use cases on the Hedera network. Isn't that a bit disappointing? And I am a little bit disappointed about that. I'm sure you're going to go into some more details around it, but this is part of a larger trend as well. We have Coinbase that already launched Base. We have Robinhood, I believe, Stripe, Circle. They're all looking at launching their own layer 1s. And we have to consider them, at least on some level, competitors. So first, you can kind of address your thoughts around Google because they are on the governing council, and then maybe the broader trend as well.
Yeah. So this Actually, yesterday, another thing that I didn't say that I've been doing, we did the table talk recording, and with Mance and Charles and Eric all on it. This is one of the questions that came up from the community. So I'm not going to go into the detail. I don't want to steal the thunder from that conversation, but it's as a teaser for table talk, which should be out in the next few days. We do talk about that quite a lot there. Just to touch on it a little, though, shouldn't be disappointed. It shouldn't be of any concern at all. Google Cloud in particular, have very specific use cases for very specific clients, particularly in the financial services space. And it's only natural that they are seeking to address that demand from a particular client set. It's not actually a layer one. So the Google Cloud Universal Ledger isn't really a layer one. It's more of a private network, highly scalable and very specific. And remember, Google come out with many, many products. Many don't actually see the light of day or don't find product market fit, and they just kind of keep on testing the market. So just being on the Hedera Council doesn't mean that they shouldn't carry on doing that, of course. But if it is successful, then we are very well placed for things like interoperability, providing a trust layer and everything else. So I know that the headline reaction is, what are they actually doing and why aren't they doing it with Hedera? But it's a very different set of use cases that they're seeking to address with that particular initiative. And on the other ones, it's almost like deja vu for the whole private blockchain thing that, sort of came up in 2015, 2016, enterprises, corporates wanting to control their relationships, control the data, sensitivity, the privacy issues. And that's still there. But it's also, now we've got these big Web3 focused technology companies wanting to own more of the stack, right? It's natural. A tech giant wants to own as much of the stack as possible to create as much value for themselves and their shareholders. And that's what we're seeing now. This is part of that cycle. So, Stripe is focusing on the payment space, launching Tempo. Circle is launching Arc. Robinhood, I don't know very much about theirs, but it's just a natural thing. This is open source, and so Bright Tech is inside those organizations that kind of inform the strategic thinkers, and then they just want to make more money. And that's almost the antithesis, really, of the Web3 space. And what I think will happen is what happened with the private blockchains, although private blockchains were technology-driven rather than business-driven. So I think they'll have slightly different outcomes. But fragmentation of the market will almost certainly happen. The use cases will be driven by those companies. So they'll kind of increasingly segment as well within their own sphere of influence. And then there'll be some kind of, reconvergence and, something will happen later. But, we've already got many, many, many chains, right? And many, many, many special purpose chains. This is just another, I think, steroid shot into the arm of the space to take it further forward. And it was always going to happen as soon as the US administration and regulators changed their shift on use of crypto assets, because these companies have been ready for that for a very long time. And that change of winds from head to tailwinds kind of, and they're ready to go. What happens in terms of product market fit and consumer adoption and readiness, time will tell. The space is currently big enough for these big players to kind of discover their role, their place, but whether or not it's big enough longer term for them all to grow, I don't know. It's interesting. But, it's going to happen because most of this technology is open source. So the first thing that a business will do is say, well, can I take this open source? Can I use it for the benefit of my own business and my own growth and revenue? And some will win, some won't win, but I think the whole space will move forward. And what is key really is that for us is that we are the trust layer underneath all that. We can provide the ability to interoperate between these networks, and interoperability in an increasingly fragmented landscape is even more important than with just a few players, because liquidity is fragmented as well, and liquidity is everything. So the bridges, the interoperability protocols that are emerging, and some of the really cool stuff that Lehman and the Hashgraph team are looking at and working on as well. All of that is going to be the main enabler, and not the fact that there are other networks growing. In fact, we want lots of networks because, we want lots of networks within the Hedera ecosystem as well. We want hash spheres. We want these shared worlds being carved out like we've always said. And we want them to be able to interoperate and be bridged and have liquidity flows where it makes sense. So I'm not that worried about it. I'm actually very excited about how this next stage is being pushed forward, because other than just those headline tech companies that are experimenting in this space, there are dozens, if not thousands, of other businesses that are now seeking to find their role within the place as well. And Hedera's there, and the Hedera ecosystem is right there as well.
Well, one of the things when you dive into the Coinbase base network, it's completely controlled by Coinbase. There's no network of nodes like what we see with Hedera or the other networks. They completely control the transactions, they control the ordering, they control everything else. And Hedera, there's going to be a need for more of a neutral party. And that gets into things like Hedera and, of course, all the other networks that we have out there. It's not like this hasn't happened before. We've talked about MasterCard Provenance. They ran their own network as well, and that ended up being sunset. I'm not saying that these networks are going to have to go down that same path, but all of that business that initially was on MasterCard Provenance has moved over to the Hedera network. So do you think that's going to happen? Do you think this is mainly just experimentation, and the best fit for most use cases are going to be those public networks like Hedera?
Well, the private chains, like I said, most of them were kind of Hyperledger. So Hyperledger, Fabric, IBM blockchain, all the big ones, the Maersk, Walmart, Food Trust, the quite high-profile project failures because of the names associated with them. This is not quite the same as that, because the names are the infrastructure providers already. So the Googles already have, the Google Cloud infrastructure, and they're seeking to actually add additional kind of nodey type value within that. But yes, it is a single player. You're absolutely right. But it hasn't, this is the really interesting thing, the Web3 space. You've got all the principled OG blockchainers or Bitcoiners, right, who truly believe in decentralization and no intermediation and no control. But then they're the same people who are very happy to use Binance and Binance Smart Chain, which has always been super centralized. And like you say, Base, very, very successful, but controlled by a single organization as another layer two, right? These are all kind of Ethereum layer twos, all of which have compromised on, security and decentralization largely. This is really, a natural progression of that, I think. And these companies will, have the right to experiment and see whether they have a role to play in it. But, you and I know that having a layer one that is the trust layer, is decentralized, properly decentralized and super scalable, as a technology should win through. And we're making every effort to ensure that it does.
So, Rob, we can move on now. The next thing I want to dive into is because I've been doing a lot of interviews around this vertical recently, and I wanted to get your take because I know you're in this space. We have PwC and Deloitte building infrastructure on Hedera. There's KPMG India, the Indian Carbon Bank that I had an interview recently, Vera, Alcott, and so many other developments in the refi space. When will we hit a critical mass in that vertical to actually have a major impact on the Hedera network? I know the potential is there, but we haven't actually seen, the needle move in the Hedera metrics yet.
I don't think it's far away, honestly. The challenge with the refi space, as we've talked about many times, is that it's not a point solution play. It's very easy to kind of think that you're going to solve all the problems of the carbon markets by just tokenizing a carbon credit. That it doesn't work like that, and it hasn't happened. If it had happened, it would have certainly been evident by now. What the foundation and the Sustainable Impact Fund and the Wes and his team, quite rightly, in my opinion, viewed from the very early days is that the ESG and sustainability market is an ecosystem play. Lots of participants. It's supply and demand. You've got projects on one side developing sustainability projects, whether they be reforestation all the way through to carbon sequestration in other ways, all the way through to biodiversity. There's a massive range. So you've got all of those projects that need to be brought on board. And then you've got the demand side. You need to connect that into the big consumers in the voluntary carbon markets and the very emerging space of biodiversity credits and such like. So, everything's moving and redeveloping slowly. But I think that it's going to be a case of everything all at once, which is what happens when an ecosystem kicks in, right? So we've seen the Verra announcement. Verra are bringing all of their methodologies, which means basically every project type that they support from a registration and credit issuance perspective onto Guardian. But there's a time, it takes time to convert the methodologies into Guardian policies. All of that is supported by the likes of Alcott, the big project developers that actually turn those project types, those methodologies and policies into real world projects. So they're actually working on the ground, working with project owners or landowners or whatever to actually create those projects and then bring those things together. We've got the same thing here in Australia with Novik Tech. Novik Tech are developing quite a lot of other methodologies and many others across the world. You've got all the work going on with the UNDP and sovereign registry bodies across Africa and across the world as well. So you've got all of these interlinked players, and then at the heart of this is the Guardian tokenization technology, which is being used in a lot of different ways, right? So you've got the purist approach to tokenizing a carbon credit or a biodiversity credit based on a methodology and policy, but then it can be used as to support supply chains, to enhance traceability and verifiability of emissions tracking at scope 1, scope 2, scope 3. So I mean, it's really complex, and your interviews have kind of shown the different angles on all of this, and I appreciate it's quite complex and to fully understand if you're not across the whole space. But all of these jigsaw puzzles or jigsaw pieces are part of a wider picture which is understood. And Wes and the Sustainable Impact Fund, supported by Hashgraph, supported by funding out of the foundation, they're all kind of placing all these players in the market. And when you turn the faucet on, when the taps get turned on and the liquidity starts flowing through it, that's when everything kind of lifts really, really rapidly. We're starting to see a few points of that. Evercity, which is one of the ecosystem partners, is doing really well in terms of carbon forwards and providing funding into projects and turning that flywheel. We're seeing some great work out of Alcott and Verra. There's a lot of work being done at the buy side. So you talk about PwC, and we've got KPMG in India, Lloyds with their mangrove and mangrove restoration projects and everything else. That's super, super important because the big four companies have all the big clients in the world. I mean, basically every big enterprise in the world actually receives consulting from one of the big four, and they all actually get audited by other ones from the big four as well. So, they're on both sides, both on the consulting and project side and on the audit and the credibility of their accounting side, which is what the auditors do, both important, right? So the strategy of engaging through the big four is absolutely correct, because it's not just those businesses. That strategy is really, really important because we get access to the entire world's enterprises. Flipping the switch that says massive international corporate starts accounting on their books with credits or other assets, nature-based assets from the Guardian ecosystem. That takes a little bit longer. But when it does, everything is in place, right? And the dominoes fall. I honestly think that will be the single most huge change in terms of transactions on the network.
Oh, Rob, one of the other things, I get regular pushback when I post those kind of interviews in the refi space, people that don't necessarily believe in climate change. But one of the things that I've found, and this is how I've responded, is regardless of how you feel about climate change, when you drill down to these projects, it takes on a conservation side of things as well, whether it's reforestation, whether it's protecting forests, whether it's the mangrove restoration, and then it's things that are unequivocally good in a different way. You would think that there would be a trade-off with some of these things, like you could do the carbon credits or you can get more yield from the crops. But that's exactly the opposite of what we're seeing. We're seeing, the windbreaks in South America, where you're increasing the yields by putting these things in, but also getting carbon credits. There's, the soil treatments that we saw in North America. Same thing. You're getting higher yields and capturing more carbon. So the way that I describe this is, when it comes down to it, we should all be for conservation. And these projects at the base layer are unequivocally good. What's your take on that?
Oh, I mean, yes, there's no doubt. You're asking the wrong person, I guess, because I'm all in. I did mean to mention that one of the points, and I'll come back to that in a second, because we probably do a whole episode on that. But but DOVU, I mean, you just need to see the sentiment increase week by week around just the DOVU project, right? Sure. I mean, they're not small. Sorry, they're not. Yeah, they're not small, but they're not huge either. And they're growing a community. They've got great price action. They're introducing new projects, and that's a real indicator, I think, that there are people out there. That you might have the climate denialists who I think are totally wrong, to be honest. But I mean, that's not for today. But you're right. This is about protecting habitat. It's about protecting species. It's about protecting our own social well-being because of the environment that we're living in. It's not about whether or not X amount of carbon contributes to X amount of climate change. It's not that at all. It's about actually doing the right thing by the planet. I'm on the board of a company called Eco Markets Australia, which is the reef credit operator for the Great Barrier Reef in Queensland in Australia. And we're doing the same thing, right? It's just a small scale, at the moment, a small scale kind of credit operation for reef credits, but they're both related to carbon because it's related to the change of practice of land management that contributes to, degradation of the reef, but also biodiversity, of course. These credits can be stacked. So it doesn't really matter which credit or which asset that you believe in. These are complex systems, of course. Nature is a super complex, probably the most complex system. And everything is interrelated, whether it's soil health, which is related to carbon sequestration, or related to land management practices and the removal of pesticides, or biodiversity and the attraction of pollinators, to everything else, to reforestation and species introduction. Do the right thing, you end up actually stacking a whole range of credits, all of which are have value in these new markets. Don't do any of it, then you don't have access to any of that value. Sorry, I'm on my soapbox now, but that's kind of where this is all going, and this is the vision, right? So the Guardian ecosystem, our sustainability ecosystem, can support all of that. And I'm very excited to see how, with my new heat hat on, I can bring that into the governing council members and really get them to understand that doing the right thing actually can contribute to so many other benefits, both at the business level and a social level.
Well, good stuff, Rob. Well covered. Before I let you go, do you want to give us a sneak peek? How did everything go for that tabletop talk? And, what can we expect here over the next couple of days when they publish it?
Oh, well, I don't want to steal Mance's thunder, but it's a great new thing to bring into the ecosystem. We are running it, not we, Mance is running it as a new layer of transparency into the Governing Council. So every time the Governing Council sits, we'll have a Table Talk episode, which will be partly a replay of the things that were discussed inside the council. So, a window into the council. So for this one, I go through my heat presentation, which are the same slides or some of the same slides that I presented to the council members. And then there'll be an AMA with whoever's who's on that particular table talk. So this time it was Mance obviously chairing with me and Charles and Eric. And then we address the topics du jour, the hot questions. I think we had about 85 questions this time, so it's difficult to get through them all. But as you can imagine, they're quite thematic, so we address them at a thematic level. But it's great and refreshing and an amazing thing to be able to bring to the community. So very keen to get the feedback from it, and maybe we can talk about that during Shark Bites in between the table talks.
Well, I'm certainly looking forward to it. But Rob, always, we appreciate you coming on here and giving us some time. Have a good day.
My pleasure. See you next time. Bye.
So when I was asking for questions for Shark Bites, I did get a question around Karate Combat, and I understand why, because that team has gone pretty much silent. And as you guys know, I was deep into the Karate token. I apologize for anybody who, because I got so excited about it, did get involved with that market. But I will say that I've bought all the way through. I bought last week because I still think there's potential. I am talking to the team on a regular basis, and they are working really hard behind the scenes. Karate Combat isn't going anywhere, and they say the trend is your friend. And once the Karate token trend started to go down, what can happen in markets is it gets overextended in one direction. And that's exactly what's happened. That's what I've seen. Now, frustration, and I should get tons of pushback on anything that I say around Karate Combat because it has been a horrible performing token. But it does remind me of another market that I got involved in years ago, and that was HBAR itself. When the HBAR launched, it launched at about 10 cents. It went up to, up into the teens on that first day, and then it continued to drop. Went below 10 cents. The last private round, the SAFT 3, was at 10 cents or 9.6 cents and 12 cents. Went way below those levels and continued over the next few months to drop down to about 1 cent. Those that got involved with that market and stuck with it and dollar cost averaged or continued buying around the bottom, they got a cost basis of about 2 to 3 cents. We'll say about 2.5 cents. So ballpark, they're sitting on a 10x now, not to mention all of the other opportunities that they saw over the past few years to get in, to get out, and increase their bags, plus DeFi and all of the staking opportunities with state or liquid staking. There was at one time good native staking on Hedera, providing liquidity. All of that kind of stuff has been just a really good opportunity. And if you've stuck with the ecosystem, you've probably done very, very well for yourself. This is kind of what I feel like with Karate Combat. It's priced now that it's dead. Makes sense. They aren't saying anything right now. But again, they are working hard in the background. But the market was very similar, right? So it launched, I think the private sale for Karate Combat was at 0.05 cents. When it launched, I think it was around 0.1 cents. It went from there, I think it dipped down to about 0.05 again, and then did a 12x up to 0.6 cents. And then since then, it's just been straight down. And now we're at 0.01 cent, give or take. I've bought all the way through. So anybody that has bought and gotten involved, I'm in the exact same boat. But Karate Combat isn't going anywhere. They are still dedicated to the up-only gaming vision. I became a super fan getting involved with it, and I know that can work again. I think you're going to be happy with some of the things that are happening behind the scenes when they get announced, if everything works out. Of course, they're working hard to make this stuff come to fruition. They still are going to have the Bonk Stadium, which is going to get a lot of the costs under control. I had fun trying to put together the sponsorships for the prize pools a few months ago, but time will tell. Of course, none of this is financial advice. Now, I certainly understand people that want to steer clear from karate, especially with so many other great tokens in the Hedera ecosystem with Gib and DOVU and Sauce and so forth. But I'm not giving up on karate. I still have a pretty big bag, and I'm really excited to see what they come out with in the months to come. So the next thing we're going to jump into is a few events that Hedera has going on. First, as Rob mentioned, we have the Swift Sibos conference where he and Greg Bell from the Hedera Foundation will be speaking. And we also have Alice Kim from the Hedera Foundation who's going to be repping our ecosystem at RWA Singapore. And before we get into the HBAR market, I want to say that the Bullbarians had a pretty darn good week. We sold nearly 20 in the mint and a few on secondary, leaving only 76 left in the mint. Of course, the Bullbarians support this channel and give you access to my token-gated HBAR Bull world, and I'm committing to doing exclusive content in that world every weekend that we don't do a DeFi Corner with Brady. And yes, the Queen is still outstanding in the current mint. Thanks again for all the support. And with that, we'll jump over to the crypto and HBAR markets. Bitcoin is down 5% on the week, but up 1% on the day to just over 110 grand. HBAR is down 9% on the week, but up 4% on the day, and at the time of recording is at about 21.6 cents. Things were oversold across crypto, and the uptrend over the past 18 hours could bode well going into this weekend. Even with the rough week, we never broke below the psychological level of 20 cents, and there wasn't any real technical damage done. It still looks like a bull flag to me. Looking forward to next week. On Sunday, we're going to do another DeFi Corner with Brady. On Monday, I believe at 3 p.m. Eastern, we're going to do a DeFi Corner live. So if you have any questions around Hedera DeFi, that's a perfect one to show up to. As far as interviews, I'm going to do Mingo at some point. We're going to get John. He's on with the Hedera Foundation. We're going to try to get some information out of him. I have a few more in the hopper. And of course, we're going to get Rob back for another Shark Bite. So if you have any questions on the HBAR economy or the Hedera ecosystem, go ahead and drop those down below. That's all we have. We'll see you next week.